I learned that every crisis was at least a big chance for European Union.
All sectors of the economy, of society, are changing really at a speed that we have never seen before. Really, the need for foresight, the need for anticipation, it's needed more than ever before. This feeling that we are in constant crisis mode is probably and sadly something that is here to stay. What if we had a 9/11 style of attack here in Europe? In this spirit, my final takeaway is that foresight is about the courage to embrace and to shape the future. And I think we can change the world. Thank you.
This ESPAS process is here to stay. I have the impression that this has been a very successful event over 2 days. The ESPAS process has developed very nicely, I would say. Not very long ago, this has just been a pilot project which was proposed by the Budgets Committee of the European Parliament. I think that this conference marks the very successful transfer of this pilot project into now permanent mode. A culture of cooperation is now coming into force among the leaderships of the administrations, in the Commission, in the Council, in the Parliament, in the Committee of the Regions, in the Economic and Social Committee, and hopefully also going beyond.
This initiative brings the institutions together. It's also remarkable because we have the same preoccupation and no single institution has a monopoly of wisdom. So I'm very happy that we are together here to sit and to think together. It's important to transform it and to go through more operational action. What does it mean? In our lives, we are responsible not only for what we do, but also for what we do not do. So let's try to act together and transform this very interesting conference into documents, tool for our political actors. Thank you very much.
Dialogue, but the dialogue especially between politicians and experts.
Science might transform us humans as we are now, and who will have access to this progress?
So geopolitics is all over the place these days, but it will be there in the future as well.
Realistically speaking, most of the time we have no choice but to accept technological or social progress. On the other hand, we actually have to have enough political tools to avoid the unwanted and strengthen the good in these new ideas. I learned that every crisis was at least a big chance for European Union to think about alternative possibilities and options and to form networks of thinkers, and I think it's much more important, of doers. I would be not here if I would not be confident that thinking about the future makes a difference.
The main question then is, how will we be able to manage this revolution? Because it generates a lot of opportunities, a lot of excitement, particularly for researchers. It opens opportunities and possibilities in medicine in particular, because it's not only the genetics that's in revolution, it's all of medicine. And we have this possibility of implementing precision medicine, which means knowing exactly what the problem is in a particular person and knowing exactly what the appropriate treatment is for that particular disease. So that's very exciting, but at the same time, we see that the implementation of knowledge goes too fast in many places. What the European Union can do is convince people that dying is normal. some people don't believe in this anymore. And what they should do is make sure that people who age have quality of life, but not prolongation of life, which is ridiculous, I think.
I think it was in Great Britain, there is a sort of in vitro fertilizations with the DNA of 3 people. Well, so what is the parentage? And if the DNA of 3 people to make a kid, so what's the parents?
10 years later, what we're seeing is actually these robots that we were developing in our research labs are making it now into the real world. They're leaving the labs and becoming products. And it did happen at quite a fast pace. We're trying to make robots that are closer to humans in how they interact. So not the dangerous ones where you need an expert to program them, but robots which we called cobots, so collaborative robots, where you can really grab their arm and teach them, like you would teach a coworker, how to work in an SME, for example. Technology has always displaced jobs, so it's not necessarily a matter of absolute numbers, but it could be that you might not do the same job that you did today in 20 years.
There are many things about nanotechnology, about genetics, about robotics, about neuroenhancement, that are hyped. They are not yet there, and maybe they are not going to be there in the near future.
Let's try to be the Silicon Valley of the economy of the 21st century.
Let the low-carbon future shape what it is we are doing, and let's not just focus on predict how with costs and benefits we can make the little steps.
And the labor demand is not really meeting those needs of the young people, and that creates also pressures from them to potentially seek opportunities elsewhere. This is a huge issue for Europe, especially now with austerity measures and the difficulties that it creates for these vulnerable groups to secure employment. But when we look at the South and the world demographics, we see that even though developed countries are aging, we have a youth bulge in certain regions.
Those younger generation and the older generation, that we can connect the two with the digitalization, and we can help them build kind of new social contacts and new types of interaction which are based on autonomy, innovation, rather than dependency. It's based on proactive prevention rather than crisis. And this is where we think we could contribute.
Society is not waiting for the institution or for kind of invisible hand to fix the problem. This is the core message of the whole ESPAS report. It's the empowerment of the individual. Solutions are not going to come from a central place or from thinking at a central place.
The issue of US leadership in terms of crisis management is going to become increasingly important, and there probably is going to be increasing demands for more US engagement. And that's going to be an issue for the United States. Ask ourselves whether countries like China or other so-called emerging powers are going to continue to be willing to operate within the existing international order, or will they eventually want to pursue a revisionist course? We are going to be more tested on our weaknesses rather than our strengths. I think that we haven't really fully assessed what our strategic weaknesses are today.
China is controlling a growing part of manufacturing trade, that China now spends on its armed forces more than Japan, South Korea, India combined. And that, of course, leads to a lot of nervousness.
The European world came to an end with the end of the Cold War. The weakness that I worry about is the decline of legitimacy of states.
What are long-term trends about? From my point of view, long-term trend is not about long-term trends, because long-term trends are not really so interesting. Whether what we are describing is going to happen in 2030 or not, we cannot know. For me, it's a way to stress test our current systems. So we develop an idea on how the world might develop, how the European Union might develop, and this is giving us the possibility to ask, are our own systems sufficiently resilient and sufficiently prepared to cope with that future that's being identified? And I believe this becomes incredibly urgent that we further develop these kind of capacities. It is true that the European Union is always developing in crisis, but that doesn't mean that we should enjoy crises too much. And anyhow, if anybody has a special enjoyment for crises, I think this need is already sufficiently covered. We can also observe these days that these kind of crises are hitting us, like now immigration, and then the policy's response has to be developed in a rather painful process. It's of course not only immigration. We've seen similar things on the development of the euro and in general our economy. So I believe it is very important that we further develop this capacity, not only to have a view of the future, but rather to develop a common view of the future, to identify where are the weaknesses in how we currently operate, and therefore develop contingency plans for what might be waiting for us in the future.